Okay, well, this is, as you can see up there, the IoT panel. So hope you're all ready to discuss IoT and maybe ask some questions of our esteemed panel. We'll go around doing a few intros. You might notice from the, well, you probably won't because it wasn't printed before, but we're down one panellist. So one panellist had a slight incident with travel. So I might fill in for him, so that's why I'm sitting here, although I'm the moderator. I'm Ian Hughes, I'm from 451 Research, and I'm an IoT analyst. And I'm going to try and see if we can get a discussion going, which I know we can, because we've already had a discussion about IoT in general, where it fits and why it's not all wearables and smart fridges. There's a lot more to IoT than that. And so I'd just like to go around, and if you can introduce yourself, we'll go in order. If you can just say who you are, who you work for, and where you fit in that IoT ecosystem, and we'll start with you.
Okay, hello everyone. My name's Tom Knoll. I'm the Managing Director of Jersey Telecom's Wholesale Division. We've been in the IoT space for the last 7 years, which a lot of people don't really realise. We're really coming from a perspective of connectivity, using our roaming agreements, using our nearly 600 roaming agreements that allowed the cell, the SIM, to move around the world and be connected. We've recently acquired the platform as well, a platform called Nomad, and we're working next year to really try and make Jersey a test bed for IoT technologies. So we've got some pretty exciting stuff coming up next year.
Hi, I'm Angus Fraser. I'm the Group Chief Technology Officer at C5 Alliance. We've been building some IoT solutions, starting off with, I guess, the most public of them in Jersey, which will be the Track My Bus system that we've built. So if anyone who's catching the bus in Jersey, been able to monitor where the buses are, what direction they're going in. We're slowly evolving that to kind of make it even more useful. We've also got devices in car parks again for the states of Jersey, so you can tell what the capacity is at the moment. And we've got some projects that are in the pipeline around environmental health, monitoring of air quality and so on, to try and monitor and improve those sort of things. Also in discussions with other states of Jersey departments and JT as well about connectivity and trying to join all the dots up.
My name's Liam Allen. I run a mobile innovation company in Bournemouth, the south coast of England, called Rarely Impossible. We have been trying to make Bournemouth a smart city for the last 12 months and done lots of different initiatives to both educate businesses of how that is beneficial to them and also help bring together the technical community into, once the infrastructure's there, what can you build on top of it? What are the commercial values that everyone can add?
Excellent, thank you. Just as a scene setter, because as I mentioned at the start, IoT means an awful lot of things for a lot of people. You say you've been doing it a long while. And if you could each just give me I'll start at the other end of the table, come this way, just for a bit of variation, so you're not getting picked on. Yeah. So, what are the components of an IoT system as far as you're concerned? What makes it IoT?
So I think probably the opposite of most, which is that IoT is not actually a thing, is that we've had devices for the last 40 years, and what we've now realised now is that they have value. And what IoT actually is the openness and accessibility of that information to do things with.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not specifically interested in devices. People think about IoT, think about the actual hardware. I'm interested in the data and what you can do with it. So joining up the dots and being able to make better decisions, or combining data sets, and which means they are typically need to be open or accessible anyway. That information has value, but it has even more value when it's connected up, when it's joined together with other data sources, helping people build a better picture and then take decisions, whether a human is making those decisions or whether we're actually automating those decisions based on aggregated data sets. But we need the data in the first place, so we need those devices, that hardware, which is slowly becoming more commoditized and easier to deploy.
For me, it's around it's connecting devices to solve real world problems and to make things more efficient. And the exciting thing about the IoT space is that the possibilities are literally endless. I actually had someone ring me yesterday, or a few days ago actually, and said they were interested in creating a smart body bag, which was an interesting idea. and quite sobering actually, because it goes a lot to really around what's going on in the world right now, but being able to track. Really the possibilities are endless, and we can actually make a real difference through the solutions that we're offering.
Okay, that's good. If you have any questions, just feel free to. Oh, straight in there.
I know the panel member who was just missing, so one of the things he's been talking to me about a lot is also the fact that the devices don't talk to each other. And there is, so your fridge, your garbage can is talking to you, but they're not talking to one another. And having the need of doing that, and how do you get to this, and this is where standards will need to happen. And so what are you guys seeing happening in that space?
So I know that at the moment you talk about standards, so open standards preferably. We know that in the Microsoft space, I've got a strong Microsoft background, and we use a lot of the Microsoft Azure IoT environments to help us accelerate the solutions that we're building. They are actually implementing solutions. They're going to try and certify some of the hardware that enables that sort of two-way communication, but it's still a hub and spoke kind of architecture rather than the devices connecting to each other. But the kind of two-way communication is getting better between the devices. So instead of a device just sending information to the hub, they're getting smarter at having the bidirectional communication and controlling devices from a central location. In terms of between each other, there's not so much of a need for that if the hub is smart. So if the hub is controlling this.
But I think that I would defer to disagree on that, because sometimes you may not, because what's happening is you need the hub to have internet to go send it up and then send it back to the other device. But if you could have it, so my whole thing is I'm thinking I put a device on a box. The box is getting put into a truck. It should be able to tell the truck, here I am, without having to go all the way back to some hub and spoke, and being able to then also, if something happens to it, telling it, because I think that's really where transportation is going to have to go.
Can I step out of moderator mode for a minute? So yes, the model there is one of edge computing, and not always having to backhaul to a cloud. And the stuff we see in industrial use, which has been there the longest, has always been, it's local, it's trying to sort the machine out, it's trying to deal with what's going on and maybe sort the other things local in the process. Increasingly, with getting the kind of digital transformation, everything going in the cloud, you've got IT departments expecting to get data sent to them so they can run big analytics processes. But what the reality is that data gets aggregated all the way as a full spectrum of, you've got the device actually right on the edge, and the edge can be anything. You've got the aggregation at these gateways, and then you've got the backhaul to maybe a regional data center, a metro data center, or off to a big cloud. So there's potential for the data to be anywhere, and the decisions and the insight to be anywhere. And this inter-device communication stuff is where we're seeing things with blockchain appearing, and that's what Don was going to be talking about blockchain. So when you hear about blockchain, you usually assume that it's about cryptocurrency and it's the underpinning of a cryptocurrency. But there's a company called Filament that have edge of network IoT devices that are remote, seldom connected, off in pipelines in the middle of nowhere. They use blockchain for when that comes online, it validates whether that is part of whether that is still in contract and still usable. So it's completely out of their centralized control. Once it's deployed, it's on blockchain, and all the rest of the devices in the mesh in the ledger will say, is that a valid device? So there's a lot of scope for that within as a standard way of devices talking to one another, as well as the industrial protocols like OPC UA, MQTT, shuffling things around in the Microsoft stack as well. So it's an important kind of component.
Yeah, and you know that Dominic's one is actually, unlike Filament, where it's asking everybody, it keeps track of itself and gets weight as much as it gets used. It becomes heavier, and which means more trusted. So that's why I don't know if I call it exactly a blockchain, but it's more like a P2P with cryptography on top to allow for a trusted mechanism, which means if somebody tries to temper, then you'll know.
Yes. And that brings us on to security, because that's one of the things Filament does is to make sure that that if somebody takes them over, that their kit doesn't get bricked by the big company that takes them over. So they use the blockchain as a sales process to say, this is a beneficial thing, so these devices will always be in contract, as well as for security. But how do you guys see maybe the flaws in security, or with customers? Do they understand what's going on with this stuff? I'll start middle this time.
Yeah, so I mean, I think we're lucky. We bring it back to looking at the smart island approach. We're kind of lucky in a sense that we probably don't have the same scale here that we might have in a larger jurisdiction. We saw the attacks, denial of service attacks recently in the States, where it's pretty poor implementation, obviously. But in terms of security of devices, I think that with the LoRaWAN that I think is hopefully going to be available for us, we're not going to need that many nodes, that many LoRaWAN so gateways basically to serve the whole island. And in security terms, I mean, it really depends on the devices, but you can have any number of either, because I don't think we're going to have millions of devices, a certificate-based approach, or it should be enough for each device to authenticate itself securely. If you're talking about wider scale than that, I think you need to look at different solutions. I actually like the discussion we had before about the filament and the blockchain architecture, which allows you to almost have something that's interoperable, so that it means that I think we talked about if that company got acquired, for example, you're talking about independence of the validation of those nodes, so that you don't have to have a proprietary way of that device being secure and valid on the network.
Yes, I mean, one of our biggest verticals that we're currently operating in the UK is in smart meters.
Right.
So a lot of the meters certainly in Scotland and in the UK have a JT SIM in them to actually connect the data back from the home to the operator. And one of the things that we are seeing now is criminals getting pretty smart about how they use that information. So hacking either into the meters themselves or into the flow of the information, and working out, for example, when someone's at home based on the use of electricity or not. And so I think from our perspective, one of the things that JT is looking to do next year is create a product that has a security overlay on it. But there are some challenges with that in terms of making, fundamentally you need to, if you're looking at blockchain, is actually encrypting the device, which adds complexity to the device, which actually means that potentially it could go wrong more, which the operators don't like either. So it's certainly a hot area, I think, for next year in the IoT space, and it's something we're sort of investing in locally to see through the IoT lab. To see what products that we can develop.
And are you finding there's a skills shortage in security professionals? Because we have from our research data that's one of the people are worried about security, but they can't get the high quality type of security staff that they need, because most of the cloud companies have.
It's a different type of security, I think, we're seeing. So it's a different type from your traditional security expert who might be looking at businesses and organizations' security, firewalls and traditional types of traffic. You're talking about embedded devices. You're talking about devices that might have a very small footprint in terms of the code on them. You might be restricted in what you can actually do with them. You're sending out bytes of information rather than running some security software on it. So it means you sometimes are restricted in what you can do with these small devices and small sensors. I know that with the Azure stack, you can have keys that are issued that you can withdraw at any time. You can kind of secure them to a certain extent, but I don't think there are that many IoT security specialists that understand embedded devices and all the GSM. Any network communication there is open to some form of fraudulent activity, but there are probably not that many security specialists that understand all the different protocols. LoRa, for example, how easy or difficult would it be to hack into those sort of networks? It's a new type of skill that, as the ways of communicating are evolving, so are the security needs, and so it is absolutely an area that's in demand.
Do you get involved in the security side of things, or is there, are there
out
people
of interest and not wanting to be on the front page of TechCrunch,
Right.
is that so LoRa, for example, security was in mind from the specification, so it's a bit different than Web 1.0, but you can still spoof a person's mobile number in today's world. So security as a whole is probably more the question, and then also the physical security of the boxes. So you can deploy keys and you can validate if it should be on the network or not. You still can't protect the box to determine, Azure still doesn't have hardware key security, I don't believe. So you then have to start putting in, physical precautions. So, does the gyro move too much? If they open, if light goes into the box, does it kind of fry the sensor itself? And then weigh that up against the importance of that data being off. Or do you start using the data that's fed from the sensor to validate inconsistencies?
That's certainly that inconsistency thing. We see there's the security products that are the firewalls and the locking the doors down and the shutting things, but increasingly there's machine learning and AI style pieces of software that are there to look for anomalies, so that you don't even know what they're looking for, and they try and track down when something weird happens, and kind of using, well, it's not quite sixth sense, but using that sort of unusual pattern of behaviour across any device, so nobody has to know anything or configure them. It will look for a steady state and then notice when something's happened.
It's like fraud prevention on credit cards.
Absolutely, it's the same technology, but applied. Often this is in industrial IoT at the moment.
I think one of the issues with security and actually regulation is that the market is just moving so quickly. It's exploding. I think Gartner said 25 billion connected devices by 2020, and I think things are taking time to catch up. So everyone's talking about security, but I'm yet to really see any kind of practical solution to actually to give us the protection that we need.
Well, certainly the Industrial Internet Consortium have just published their security framework document, which has taken 2 years to get to, and that's a mixture of operation technology and IT people, and their core is trust, not security, because it's a trust through the entire manufacturing process and through the entire chain. But that's them suggesting that they need to do it. But obviously most of the things that are happening at the moment are brownfield development, so it's difficult to retrofit.
Tokenization? Because I've been hearing some noise around that, the tokenization around the device to talk about the trust. So you start the trust at the manufacturing with the token.
Yes.
But where do you think the problem could be around that?
Interception.
Interception creation?
Yeah. So if the thing with trust is great if it's trusted, or if you think it's trusted and then it's not, then it's could be more catastrophic. I think it's just you have to have so many different kind of variables. Like when you log into Facebook, you can get your password wrong, but it'll still log you in because there's other 200 signals that indicate that you are who you are. Yeah. So it's kind of, don't rely on just one thing. It's going to be a mixture of a bit of everything.
I think these days you kind of have to assume breach as well. So the pattern detection, the anomaly detection is something that's on a large scale is necessary anyway. So you can prevent as much as you can the devices, and you can have encryption and what have you. But the assume breach is a practice that a lot of organisations are taking in general, never mind in the IoT space. So if you've got the means to detect anomalies, then those means are fairly sophisticated these days. Even if you've got false positives, that knowing what normal is, and then being able to detect any variance in that is something that a lot of organisations, we're certainly doing that in the outside of the IoT space in organisations.
Excellent. The ones I see are when two different parts of the organisation are being forced together. And very often things, as it always happens in IT, things that are prototypes end up going live. So my example, and it happened with Nissan Leaf. So I've got a Leaf, it's got an app, you can turn the air conditioning on and off, and the guy in Australia found that it was a completely open web API that only needed the VIN number from the car that's printed on the car to trigger the air conditioning. So even though the app had all those nice password things and we had to register it and do all the normal things, it was just two worlds colliding. It was the automotive guys checking it out, the IT guys not really knowing about it, and it went into production. And that's where those dangerous gaps are, isn't it?
We've partnered with Bournemouth University's cybersecurity division, and we were hoping to do it this quarter, but next quarter, inviting kind of student researchers, white hat teams to come to Bournemouth and just to break the network, and, and to find them loopholes, both from a hardware and a software side, and reward them. The bounty program thing has worked quite well in these kind of situations. LastPass's recent one was found by LastPass is a password management tool, and the breach that was found there was found by Defectly, which is basically 4 guys out of kind of Norway, and was missed by everyone else. So it kind of shows that who knows who's going to kind of find these things. So like you said, you just got to assume that you've been hacked and mitigate the risk.
So given the newness of the skills required and the fast-paced evolution of this stuff, and it can be done anywhere, would you say that security would be a focus that Jersey could look at as a thing to focus on to build the skills in, rather than kind of generic IoT that everyone's got an IoT platform and doing these things? Do you think there would be a potential there for that to be the drive, kind of like The Hague does with security and with kind of isolating data?
I suppose it's possible. I mean, it depends what sort of. I mean, as we mentioned already, some of the newer protocols, like we're talking about LoRa, a lot of these things have been designed in terms of the transport with security in mind. But there is such a variety in device types and what it is they're trying to do and how they're communicating. It's probably hard to apply a broad brush. This is a specialism in this area because it is all moving so quickly. Yeah. But I do think there are certain use cases for sure where you can have some best practices and you can understand what the general risks are. But then if you look at what's going on and these problems that you mentioned with the Nissan Leaf and also the recent case in the States with the DDoS attacks, that's just poor implementations. These are things that could have been avoided without having security experts. They could have been avoided by just applying best practice, which is not necessarily a specialism that people should adopt. It just should be the standard. Unfortunately, it's not.
I think Jersey's ideally placed to be a test bed for new technologies. To your point earlier, we're small enough, but we can roll out a low-RAR network. And the commercials about rolling out a low-RAR network, it needs to be cheap enough because we only have a certain amount of people on the island that are going to be wanting to use it. But there are off-island justifications for it because you can prove how to roll out a low-RAR network. You can then start playing with devices on it. You can look at security potential products on it, and then you can then take those and then sell those off-island. So there's a huge potential, I think, for a laboratory type.
I'm aware with my IT hat on, I know what you're talking about, but I don't know if everyone knows what those networks are. What distinguishes those what is special about a LoRa network? So,
I'm not technical,
but
I'll give you my layman speak. At the moment, the biggest form of connectivity for an IoT device is cellular. But cellular actually there's only about 10% of the world that's covered by a cellular network. And so there are other types of connectivity mechanisms, LoRa being one of them, which is a sort of a low, basically a wide but basically it covers a very large distance and allows you to transfer very small bits of data over a very large area. So to give you an example, to cover Jersey, it's going to be about 9 to 10 antennas to cover the whole of Jersey. You still need a gateway, so you still need to get that data off that wide network back. So there's still a place for cellular or satellite or other types of connectivity. But essentially, every different vertical of IoT has different requirements for how you connect. And what we're trying to do is actually create a laboratory type setup in Jersey, which allows us to test all of those types of connectivity and actually invite people from outside of Jersey and companies out from outside of Jersey to come and test on the island using the infrastructure we have.
Yeah, I mean, I think that actually looking at partnering with academic organisations or others like Lee has been talking about could be something where we look at the LoRa network that JTR are building and being able to package something up and say, actually, we've implemented a LoRa network and we know the best ways of securing this is something that might be of value. But I think there's not enough LoRa networks out there to see what happens when people are actually competing, where you've got these competing LoRa networks. And I think that's another area where, as a test bed, we're in a kind of unique position where we should be able to do certain things which haven't been done elsewhere, and therefore it's got value because people want to know how that actually works in practice.
So what other things should we be doing in Jersey? Talking about using this as a test bed, using this to go out, but what should we be testing, what should we be considering?
So I mean, a big vertical that's taken off Ireland is smart agriculture, which to me fits perfectly in the Channel Islands. So, you know, being able to put, they've recently done it in Glasgow. They've rolled out a LoRa network. And also in Glasgow, they've then sort of partnered with farmers to put tags around sheep or cows. They can tell you know, the health of the animal, they can tell whether it's sitting down or standing up. They can tell whether it's in estrus. You know, they can tell a hell of a lot of stuff that actually makes, you know, and why would they want to know this? So it's all to drive down costs for the farmers. That's really why the farmer's interested in this. And you know, things like monitoring air pollution. In Glasgow, the LoRa network they've rolled out, they can tell in a part of Glasgow whether there's a large construction project going on. They can actually tell if there's a traffic jam based on the air pollution and the monitoring of that air pollution over that network.
Yeah, I mean, we're working with environmental health on a few potential initiatives, but if everybody building a building of a certain size had to put some devices in as a condition of building before, during and afterwards, we can start to monitor and see what the impact is of the large building costs. We look at the new finance centre, for example, that's relatively easy for these devices to be positioned in place, lowish costs using the LoRa networks, and collecting that information helps us to build a picture of actually what's going on and can have an impact on traffic and planning. So we're also looking at the transport department. But I mean, talking about farmers, I actually realised this morning that I was at Jersey Dairy, I think it was the other day, and we had to wear these devices when I was at Jersey Dairy to sort of keep our. I had it still in my pocket, but we went to the to have a look, and I was wanting to talk about Internet of Cows, which sounds a bit mad, but it's exactly that sort of thing where
Internet mad cows.
Yeah, well, and we want to be talking about these sort of things where we can say we've got this test bed, we've got easy access to legislation and to all the departments and bringing things together. And I know that some of the red tape challenges that Lee is facing, I think we can solve a lot more easily here, which makes us kind of ideal. So we can bring the health, environmental health, and transport and planning, who might all have an interest in a particular solution, which might be the air quality one, and decide why it is we want to monitor this information, measure it, make it open to the public, and help make decisions around transport and traffic and things like that.
So, Lee, that's your bus stops.
Yeah.
Key bus stop talk.
Yeah, I suppose it comes down to what you want it to be, and what you need. How far do you need people who are kind of helping instigate this to outline what is possible? Because if you say you can do anything, then it's a bit too much. But, you know, kind of like what's been said, it's finding things that are already a problem, and can this stuff kind of at least mitigate. Like what we found is when we started 18 months ago, no one had any idea like what you could do. And then even just having a circle on a map that said if you put a sensor in this circle, you can get the data within 15 minutes. It then just started the conversation, and then people started kind of going, oh, well, if we did this, and if we put sensors around construction sites, could we then start to know things? Could we determine where there's quiet parts of the town? You know, can we alert people if someone's having an epileptic fit and people think he's drunk and they just step over him? But if you can see on a digital screen that he has a medical condition, you'd be more engaged to kind of collaborate. And it's more of that type of stuff that the only way that works is if the kind of digital and the infrastructure side really engages with the companies and people who can kind of come up with them things that are going to be benefit to everyone as citizens and businesses.
We certainly find that from the research, actually going out and asking companies, what are you doing with your IoT stuff? There's lots of companies that have IoT projects, but sort of 30-40% at least are not doing anything with the data. So they just thought, oh, we need to collect everything, we need to instrument everything because that's the current thing to do. And they're all now trying to work out why they instrumented it in the first place. So it was just because they felt it needed to be done, or it was just produced. It was all big data, they had the pipes to do it. But now the kind of trick is to come in and start pulling all these disparate data sources together that might be from lots of unusual places. And that's something that enterprises aren't always, and governments aren't always geared up to do. So things like the weather, we mentioned the weather is very well instrumented and there's lots of ways to pull information. And it's why IBM bought the Weather Channel, which seemed a weird thing for IBM to do. But now, when you talk to them about smart buildings, they're saying, well, the building is working out what the weather's going to be in half an hour's time, precisely where it is, to know whether to turn the heating up, because it's better to turn the heating up before it gets really cold, because there's less cost. So these disparate data sources are being pulled together. So once you start instrumenting things, that then opens up, especially if you make it open data, which quite often public data has to be, opens up to startups to be able to pull that stuff together. And we might not even know what they're going to do with it yet. There's the obvious ones, but that's not where the innovation is. The innovation is these ones that we don't know about yet, I think.
So you actually went where I wanted to go, data, but there is that whole, I can't remember the company, the tractor company, it's becoming a big issue in Europe.
Yeah.
Who's been collecting data on the farmers and not letting it be known that they're collecting the data. So I think that there is also an opportunity within Jersey to look at the regulations that are going to be needed around the data. One, the protection, and to me, two, changing the acceptability of that data as evidence, because there's still certain things on the book where the data is not evidence. So if you start talking land registry, how do you actually create, with that data that you're collecting, the evidence that the land belongs to that person, and then recognize it by law?
Absolutely. There's a place for regulation. I'm kind of libertarian, so I don't like regulation that much. But equally, I appreciate we need it in certain circumstances. What's your feeling on?
I think if you think of things like smart retail, you know, where the world's going, I think, is you're walking down the street and they know that it's you walking down the street, and then start putting advertisements directly to you based on your previous spending requirements or your previous buying habits. And I think that, you know, that's coming, but then there's also the changes in the EU data protection laws that are coming as well, and I think that's quite an interesting dynamic. That, you know, the penalties under the new EU data protection laws, I think, are the higher of, I think it's something like £6 million or 5% of global turnover. So, you know, if you're talking about a big operator, say like Vodafone, that is a huge monetary penalty. Yes. So people are going to be becoming a lot more concerned and worried about data protection, and it's going to be interesting about how that sort of correlates to the new products that people want to innovate and bring out to the market.
Yeah, and I think as well as the regulation side of things, there's also what is culturally acceptable and socially acceptable by certain people. So at the moment, it's possible to even look at a video and work out how happy the people are in that video, and sort of have some sentiment analysis, but only if you're recording their faces, obviously. So is that permitted if it's just going to be done to sort of gauge how happy are people at certain times of day? And should we change our... I mean, I was talking to Lee about this before. I think, you know, there's cultural acceptance of certain measurement of certain things, but people don't like cameras, for example. So then that is not always a regulatory thing. It's what's socially acceptable too. So sometimes it is regulatory. You can't do that. We've got the GDPR or whatever too that's coming out in terms of the data protection. But then there's, you know, what are people willing to accept? Do they actually want to have people tracking them from their mobile phones, for example? Where are they going using their mobile phone data? Do people actually, will that be acceptable to do that, even if it's anonymized? And that's sort of something it's difficult to get the balance right when you're trying to innovate as well as worry about privacy.
Lee?
So everyone tells Facebook everything, and no one really cares, apart from me, who's the only person involved without a Facebook account. But in the offline world, there's more of a fear, though it's probably more worrying in the or should be more worrying in the online world. The EU directives around privacy by design is not, things like that where it's not even it's an advisement. It's to encourage people to start thinking about privacy as a default. The tractor company you mentioned about Europe, I don't know much details about that, but there's a startup in the US who help farmers work out crop yields, and they share information between them all. But the deal is you put your info in, and so does everyone else, and it becomes like a cooperative. And they have a thing in their contractors as a company, is if that business gets sold, they don't sell basically the data, so the company can't then undercut, kind of privatize it. And I think it should be seen more as a business opportunity, in my opinion, that if you build more open systems or more kind of protective stuff, people will pay a premium for that. And hopefully they're the ones that will kind of win out. But, Facebook and Google are the biggest companies in the world, and they're ad-driven.
I think that we've given up our identities to Facebook and Google. That doesn't mean, the projects I'm trying to do is looking to bring in the concept of identity first, so that you then end up with this idea of sovereign identity, to where my data is mine. If you're providing me a service, I provide it to you for a certain amount of time. And I think that's the difference that needs to come in with data, to where there's an agreement, and if there's a monetization of the data, there should be a share back to me.
Yeah.
I agree. It's tricky. Sorry.
I just want to not so much of a question, just want to think about what you asked about what Jersey can do, and I think we have an opportunity here that we have a great deal of technology specialists, and we can have someone from a telecommunications company, someone from the health department around the table and a lawyer very, very quickly and say, what's a quick win project? So somebody who didn't make it today is focused in the UK on the cost of old people falling over to the UK economy is £5 billion a year. So she's designing devices that can be IoT connected to help identify and monitor that, to build new solutions to reduce that cost. So we can look at things like water quality. How much does our water company pay, and where does it invest its time to dig up the roads? And if we were to dig up certain parts, so we only have 5 reservoirs, let's monitor from the reservoir to the tap, we might find and resolve costs. So it's really, where can we monitor something quickly, low cost, and then market that success back out and say, we did this, and we did this in 6 months, and this was the result. And starting with that data set, knowing what the data set's going to be, analyse it, produce it, put it out on the internet and say we've done it, and we've collected that data set, and we've learned from it. But I think it's those small, quick win projects where we can identify. I think cost has to come down to it.
It does. I mean, that's most of the industrial reason is to have a better yield, to use less resources, to produce more things quicker and not break machines while you're doing it. And that pattern applies to life, to islands, to government, whatever you're going to do. But it's as you said, it's the analysis. And one of the things we haven't fully touched on is what's going on with machine learning and with analytics and with deep learning with AI, and how important that is given the amount of data we're generating. Are you diving into the world of AI?
So we've worked out, so our plan is to have 1,000 sensor boxes across a conurbation. It hopefully will be Bournemouth, with 10 sensor readings within each box. So temperature, humidity, vibration, noise, all these different types of things. At an interval of every minute, that equates to 5.2 billion data points a year, of which there is value, but them data points alone mean nothing. They don't really tell you anything. So it's then using AI, machine learning, to turn that into small data, into insights that is that one liner of text, which is, don't hang the washing out today, it's going to rain. Or, walk this way to work because, or drive this way to work, your insurance premiums will be cheaper because there's less likely you're going to be in a car crash. There's all these things that once you've got all this data, the same way that we have weather data, that we can then start acting upon it. But facial recognition and them services got better and better and better once we had a data size that we could train it with. And we just don't have that yet with sensor-based information that's open.
That's very true.
Yeah, I mean, we are also. I mean, we've got some guys that work in our team PhDs in artificial intelligence looking at some of the ways of analysing big data that's been collected by some of our financial services clients. But what we'd like to do is apply that same logic to some of the data sets that we're slowly starting to open up. So, for example, working with transport, you've got automatic number plate recognition, journey times, the weather. We've already got the car parks and the bus data, or some of the bus data, I should say. When we've got all of this, being able to predict with a certain level of accuracy what mode of transport is best, when to get from where to where, is something that is possible to do with machine learning and using the sort of the big data sets and historic data on the weather and so on.
And that sets up well for autonomous cars because they need that vehicle to infrastructure information as well, not just their kind of local bubble of thing. They need to know where they're going to go.
And like I've had a look at what transport are doing in a small sort of confined area. They've got models that they can use to a certain extent, but they're very localized. And I think once we start having the kind of the big data sets, we'll start to see more uses of that data and applying machine learning algorithms to predict certain conditions and make people kind of make different decisions, not necessarily better, but different decisions based on analysis of what's going on.
And presumably in network traffic, there's a lot of analytics required already. Are you seeing some more kind of higher order AI stuff coming in to keep those connections up?
We haven't yet. I mean, there's a lot of talk in the market about big data, but again, to me, it comes in a similar package as the security side of things, and it's for sort of so what? How do you make money from it if you're a commercial entity? How do you make money from big data? How do you use that big data to make better decisions or actually save costs if you're I mean, where we're seeing artificial intelligence come is a completely different use case, but is in sort of call centre type operations. I actually read an interesting statistic the other day that amongst the millennials in America, 60% of people would rather clean the toilet than talk to a human being when they've got an issue with their utility company. There are now solutions out there where you will be talking to a robot and you don't even know you're talking to a robot until the robot can't answer your question, and then that information then passes directly to a live human being who carries on seamlessly, and I think that's going to actually cause an explosion in messaging. A lot of people think that messaging is a dead medium, but I disagree. I think it will grow, because people want to talk over text messages rather than on the phone.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen things like at the moment you're seeing companies like Uber, for example, and bot frameworks that are allowing messaging frameworks. Like, for example, you're talking on Messenger, Facebook Messenger potentially, that some people might use, and you can actually, without having an Uber app installed, you can use the bot framework. You can actually get an Uber cab to pick you up from within the Messenger framework. And these sort of things are becoming more and more prevalent, where you've got artificial intelligence bots that are intersecting or integrating with some of the messaging frameworks and allowing people to do certain things. Like you're talking about pizza to a friend, the bot comes in and goes, would you like to order a Domino's to your usual address? Okay. And it's making it, that it's smart, it's scary, but we're seeing a lot of the bot framework. I think is going to take off a lot as well, and Microsoft are making it easier to write and develop the artificial intelligence around that sort of functionality.
My kids order kitchen roll off at Amazon Echo pretty much every week. Amazon Echo's a voice activated box.
And you get through a lot of kitchen roll.
Yeah, but they to them, it's Alexa. It's a thing that exists in the house, and to the point that my wife was asking to order something, and my child said, "No, Daddy's already told Alexa that we need that." So this is the stuff that's going to kind of take these things to a whole new level, and this continues
just
to.
Interest. How many people have got an Amazon Echo? Always just us. If you haven't, they are incredible when they work. When your network's working, it's incredibly useful to be able to just shout at it.
It is.
So you want something.
What is Alexa listening to when you're not talking to Alexa?
Well, that's true.
So there's a lot of privacy concerns around that, so that's a little bit scary as well. And you hear stories. Well, Facebook does analysis on what people type as a status, but then delete. So what is it? That's apparently more interesting than what people are posting. It's the things that you nearly posted.
Yes.
And it's a scary, it's a scary world out there, but that has got significant value. Yeah.
So there's room for a startup called I Was Drunk or something like that will only publish those as a feed for people.
Yeah.
That's excellent.
I mean, you open yourselves up to these sort of things
Yes.
if you, like you said, I was talking before about the privacy and the innovation side of things. If you want to be at that cutting edge, there's a trade-off, and I think we've accepted if we want to be in that space that we're probably giving our privacy away in return for being at that edge and getting some of these services.
I've got a quote from Cory Doctorow that he put on Twitter after the American thing. I managed not to say the name. It said, all those times when we said, when we build mass surveillance, you don't just put power in the hands of those you trust, but also the next guy. And that's the danger here. I mean, like at the moment we're trusting, well, some of us are sort of trusting Facebook. You don't trust Facebook, but if Facebook changes hands or is doing something surreptitious, then we're in trouble, aren't we? And do you have a view on how we can stop that happening? That's a difficult question, isn't it?
Delete Facebook.
Well, it's not just
It's too late, isn't it?
If we're all being instrumented all the time, for instance, if you've got a HoloLens on your stand, that's mapping the room. There's that data could be going anywhere. That's an actual accurate map, 3D map of the room and also the people moving around in it. And there's no easy way to stop that happening. So what are we going to do?
Well, who owns that data?
Yeah.
So some cases it's quite easy. Health data, I own that data, or I should own that data. I should be able to release certain bits to certain, like my GP, certain bits of it for a period if necessary. So that's some of these places are clear cut. I think we were talking earlier about the Google Glass didn't really succeed. People were not ready. They felt that it was an intrusion on them and on their privacy. And it wasn't easy enough to tell whether someone's wearing Google Glass or not, or what they're recording. And so the HoloLens is a bit more obvious today because it's a big device. Stand out of the way if you don't want to be caught in it. But still going back to the question of who actually owns the data that's being recorded. Is it all being sent off somewhere to do some analysis of what people are really looking at? And although we're just talking about looking at holograms and doing some fun stuff with it today, when those things evolve and they become a bit smaller, then there could be value in that data and who owns it. I'm sure that the lawyers have got it sewn up so that when you buy it and you wear it, they say that they can do what they want with the data, but we're starting to verge onto this grey area now.
I think the other thing is for data actually classified as personal, because if it's non-personal data, then it doesn't carry the same regulation as personal data would. It's not protected in the same way. So it's whether the information can be used to identify you are who you say you say you are. So.
Got any thoughts on protection as a Facebook Luddite? Because you've probably got the best bet.
So I look at it as a parent. So I see it as my children have not decided if they want their life shared with the world. So I'll let them figure that out when they're 18. They'll probably decide why has all my friends got all their pictures for the last 18 years organised correctly and I don't. But again, you can every non-ad driven organisation that has tried to do these things as a premium with intention of privacy is never as big as the Google and the Facebooks of the world, because they can loss lead on these things, because the data about you is too valuable. So it comes down to either we take the same approach as fraud protection, and that type of thing. You just give off false information. So you give these accounts and you give it so many sporadical bits of information about you that it can't know you. But I worry that people don't really care.
Well, I think what we've kind of, because we've strayed into personal privacy and security, which is important. But I think the element there is that when we hear IoT, people often think, oh, it's the device, or it's the wearable, or it's the network. But we're as much part of the planet as anything else, and we're being instrumented. and we have an impact on IoT, and so consequently we can have a positive impact on IoT in helping shape it and build whatever the next level of network is and businesses are. But we are part of the system, and we can't ever now stand back from it, because we're going to be sitting with a HoloLens on or looking at stuff. It's not something that's happening somewhere else. And but just coming back to something that maybe might be good for Jersey to focus on, or anywhere for that matter, when we were talking about data and understanding it, the data scientist is a new job. Again, just like the security job, it's a different type of way of dealing with data. And you mentioned you've got PhDs working for you that have got AI and hence delve into data science. Are you dealing with data scientists, do you find, or are you turning into one?
It's an inevitability. It's something that we're looking at next year with regards to knowledge transfer partnerships, actually, again with the research within local universities around data scientists, but you need the data. You know, big data is a term that's thrown around a bit too loosely. Yeah. Like, big data is, so we're not anywhere near there yet. It's so, I think Google, if they do a scan of the internet, it's like 14 petabytes or something. And the view is that we'll get to a point where organisations have 14 petabytes each.
Well, certainly a jet engine generates
exactly
towards that in a flight.
So it's things like that where, it's just, you can't do anything with it apart from understand it a bit more. But again, it kind of comes back to the there's a great book, I forget his name, but it's called Small Data, and it was about this guy who, a bank, loads of people were moving money, so they thought all their people were leaving, all the customers, so they'd write all these things out saying you should stay with us, we're a great bank. But what happened is they were all just getting divorced, so the money was just getting moved around, and it was only the human element that kind of detect that.
The only way I think Jersey can win is to be agile and to be quick and to be innovative, and then to open up our island to larger companies who then want to come in and test what it is that they're building. So we were talking to Amazon only the other day. They are building out an IoT solution, and JT is sort of involved in helping them potentially with that. But Jersey's got a lot going for it. Next year we will be the most connected place in the world, Jersey, and so we've got all the basic building blocks to actually have a part to play in IoT development.
And just to back that up, sorry, I know we're running out of time, but I know that there are some hardware partners that are actually very interested in when the LoRa network is up in developing solutions and testing them over here. That I know there's some evidence of that, having spoken to Digital Jersey about when they were going to put the LoRa network up before JT decided to do it. There are some hardware partners absolutely willing to and wanting to try and put solutions here to test them. So the testbed idea is probably one of the most viable market opportunities for Jersey to kind of lead the way, or be in a strong position to do something different and innovative.
Cool. No one's nailed it. Like 4 years in, 10 years in, Amsterdam's been doing it for 15 years, but no one's actually got to what we all want as a smart place. You guys seem to, you'd be idiots not to do it, to be honest.
That's a good one to finish on. You'd be idiots not to do it. I like that. That's like the Alan Davis show with the title at the end. So this is you have to be idiots not to do it. Anyway, I'd like to thank my panel. We've run out of time. Thanks to the audience as well. Thank you very much.